All right, here we are with Mr. Mike Needham, Head of Player Development for the Okanagan Hockey Academy. Thanks for joining the podcast, Mike.
You're welcome. Nice to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Well, anytime we have a chance to chat some hockey, I enjoy it. And any chance I have an opportunity to talk to somebody who played with the magnificent one, I got to take the opportunity to do it. So looking forward to chatting about Mario and your time in Pittsburgh. But once again, thanks for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome.
Well, let's start. I love talking hockey. I mean, you're an ex-NHLer yourself, very accomplished junior career. How did it all start with you? And we'll take it back to the roots, and that's usually the best place to start because I think for both of our audiences, they're on their journey, right? They're going through the minor hockey thing. They're trying to find what works and where's the best spot for them. So what was that like for you when you were growing up? And at what point did you maybe think that you wanted to be a hockey player?
I think, I first of all grew up in Fort Saskatchewan, Alberta. It's a little town outside Edmonton. And, fortunate to play with a group of players there. We had 4 other professional players came off the same Pee Wee and Bantam team. So we were a strong group. And so, kind of growing up with some good coaching at the minor hockey level back in a day where ice time was never an issue. There wasn't a lot of teams around. We were on the ice a lot. We had the outdoor rink opportunities all the time. And it was just, hockey was sort of life, what we did for fun. It was not only, the sport of hockey and the organized stuff, but it was, we did spent a lot of time with stick and puck on the ice. So, it just became part of my life. Grew up there, played through my Bantam hockey time there. And then it was back in the days when the Western Hockey League would list players. There wasn't the draft at that time. So I was listed by different Western League teams and, eventually found myself on Kamloops Blazers list. Right after Bantam, I went from Bantam. I skipped midget altogether and went to the Junior A Fort Saskatchewan Traders at the time. Spent a year and a half there, and then in my 16-year-old season went to Kamloops. Had a wonderful time, wonderful career with a very, very strong Kamloops Blazers organization at the time. We competed every year for Western League championships. My last year there, it was 1989-90. We won the Western Hockey League and went to the Memorial Cup where we fell a little bit short there. But I had a pretty wonderful season there, obviously going to the Western Hockey League, but making the Canadian World Junior team and winning a gold medal with Canada in the 1990 World Juniors. So that year was, pretty special, a lot of winning, lots of good things going on. Had been drafted the previous summer with the Pittsburgh Penguins, as you mentioned. Signed my first pro contract that year as well, in the Memorial Cup, right at the table at the Memorial Cup pregame dinner. So that was kind of cool. And then that was my 1920 season. Didn't go back to junior as an overage and turned pro the very next year. With the Muskegon Lumberjacks, which at the time in the International Hockey League, the IHL, was the Penguins affiliate. So spent a couple of really good seasons where I learned, a little bit about the pro game, had some great mentors, guys like Dave Mikhailuk and Jock Callender, sort of iconic names from that era in the IHL. I think Jock Callender may be the all-time leading scorer, or was at one time in the IHL, and had a chance to play with guys like that. Kind of taught me a little bit about how to be a professional. And then was fortunate enough, 1991-92 season, it was a time where Penguins were in the Stanley Cup Playoffs, and so were we. We were down actually in the IHL League Finals, just getting ready to play the first game, and Mario Lemieux, Bob Erie, and one other player, I forget right now, were injured all in the same game playing the Rangers in the second round. So the 3 guys or 2 other guys I just mentioned, Jock Callender, Dave Mikhailuk, and myself, all got called up to the Stanley Cup playoff run, 91-92. So we were able to get in, play some games, contributed. I scored a goal in my second NHL game, and went on to that year win the second Stanley Cup, or be a part of the second Stanley Cup run with the Penguins. It was an incredible, sort of run. Without Lemieux for a lot of it too. That was one thing people kind of forget. He was gone for a number of games with a broken hand, and it was pretty cool. I think it showed the depth in the Penguins system to be able to bring a whole lineup that could contribute, and then just the depth of team players like Ron Francis and Rick Tocchet, Kevin Stevens, all just incredible players. Larry Murphy on the back end, Tom Barrasso in net. So some wonderful Hall of Fame sort of names there that had a chance to come in and contribute and play with.
Yeah, wow. I mean, for sure. And I definitely want to get to. We're gonna have to go back now, and I'm gonna have to talk about all that because there is little pieces there that I want to definitely chat about. Maybe like the first part that I found interesting is just that puck and stick time you were talking about. I think that was the first thing that kind of stuck to me, and I know for me, time flies, right? And I don't remember exactly how many practices we had a week, when I was growing up. I don't remember how many games we would play in a season, but it did seem like at some point that I was out on the lake and I was, I had the rink in the garage, and, it just seemed like there was more of that happening, at least then, than it is for my kids now. Like it just seems that they're so busy that there's not really much time to do that. And even if you are finding the ice, it seems like it's more programmed ice, like it's always with a whistle, or it's always, working on your skating, or kind of, like this professional approach at like from 8 on kind of is that what I mean? How do you remember that? Like your childhood, like was there, like there's definitely was just a lot of time there. And how do you contrast that to what you see today?
Yeah, those are great points, Jason. When I was a kid growing up, there was a lot of unorganized, just go and throw a puck on the ice. I remember at, 8, 9 years old out on the ice with 14, 15-year-old kids that are, guys that I actually idolized, obviously. They're older, playing at the AAA levels there. And I had to try to compete with them. If I wanted to touch the puck, I had to be able to do some things. So you work and refine things pretty quickly. And there isn't any structure to it. Those times I really remember very fondly. It was just fun. It was a great time, and it was the days where I was fortunate too. I literally live a block away from the outdoor rink. I could put my skates on the back door and walk over with my skates on to the rink, and then just play for hours and hours. My parents really didn't worry about me because I knew exactly where I was. First and foremost, I was on the rink. And, we would race home from a game. We'd play a game in the morning, race home, get our stuff back on the rink. And so, just that unorganized, impromptu, making plays, learning how to, play against bigger players, protect pucks, all of those things that, you can do with structure. I mean, part of my role, as you mentioned, is player development and skill development. But I still go back a lot, even today. I go back to giving my athletes time just to have fun, just to play a small area game. I believe that's a big part of, creating skill within, and there's things that stick with you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I try and do that with my programs too. I got some stuff on the ground stuff here in Vernon, and I didn't start that way, but now I have progressed that way, that I actually do plan in. Like I have, for both my summer camps and my spring teams, like I have a day that's dedicated just to 3-on-3 where I'm like legitimately not coaching. I'll maybe blow the whistle or whatever to have them change or whatever, but they're just playing, and I obviously I want them to work and compete, but I mean, just play. I mean, I'm not coaching, I'm not telling anything. And I do think that I don't know, like there's value there in the fact that, I think you're building some hockey IQ in that, but I think more importantly, I think that you're building like the passion. I mean, you kept using the word fun, and I think that they're genuine. There's some type of grassroots fun and just involved in playing, and not being judged necessarily, and not being, looked at. And so I just want to, especially at the age groups I'm working with now, which is usually like U15 and under, like I really want to promote that passion. And I think for anyone that I've had in this episode on the podcast, and we're over 100 now, like that seems to be like such a framework of success, is just absolutely loving it. Right. And I think that has to happen at the younger ages, because it's going to stick with you later on.
I would agree. We're fortunate right now to have a couple of kids playing in the program on our U15 prep team that grew up that way. You talk to their families. They're wonderful players, talented, going to be very, very high picks in the Western League draft this year. But they grew up that way. They grew up playing the game, just playing, and not organized either. Just going out there. They're also the same ones that are shooting 1,000 pucks in the backyard, breaking windows. And one mom telling me how many windows the one boy has broken in his in his short time here. And it is, that's passion. And ultimately, in the business that I'm in, I talk about the Okanagan Hockey Academy. That is a big, big part of the kids that come into the program, is having the passion to play the game. You can't force a kid. You can't manufacture the passion. They have to have it from within, or it honestly really doesn't work. They will fall short at some point. Those kids that have that passion, that want to play, that love it, that just live and breathe it, are the ones that are going to be successful.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, not only do you get better, of course, I think that there's that end product of passion, because to your point about the shooting the pucks, or like, it's not work, right? It's like, it's what you just want to do. So, I mean, you're going to, the skill set's going to improve. But the other one that I think is where it gets maybe not as much recognition as how it serves you, is when it comes to the adversity, because it's not easy, right? At some point, it's not easy, and it's going to be not easy quite a few times. And the question is, like, how many times do you keep showing up, and how do you keep up with that passion? And I think that's where it serves guys, especially when we're talking about, the trajectory of getting paid to play the game, or getting your school paid for to play the game. Like, there's some things that there's going to be some bumps in the road, and passion is a pretty big key of making those things happen.
Yeah, that is an absolute there. You have to enjoy what you're doing. You got to love it. It's got to almost be ingrained and a big part of your life. And I think you made mention a little bit about kids of today, kids now kind of growing up. There are so many distractions. I mean, there truly are. It's the social media, the phones, the gaming. There's those are just a couple of things that keep kids in the home, away from doing things outside, like hockey or road hockey, or on ice stuff. So there are so many distractions. Skiing in our area, obviously, and so that is, to me, that's also a little bit of a problem. Kids that are passionate about the sport, you don't see them on those things. You see them out there. The first thing that they wake up thinking of is hockey and having fun and getting out with the shticks. Like that's just what it's all about. And ultimately, you talk to any NHLer, as they're breaking in, turning pro, they're going to say a lot of the same things I am about that passion. They had it as a young person, and it's propelled them to where they are at this point.
You mentioned that outdoor time, and I mean, maybe I'm jumping the gun here, because we are going to talk about you at OHA and what you're doing there, and the hockey academy system, and really, I mean, what a force it's become in the hockey world these days. But one thing where I think I would struggle from a development perspective, and especially with the families, I mean, that want hockey, and I don't know what your philosophy is, but I love being able to intermix like athletics with hockey, like to allow these kids to do other things, not only because I think it helps them mentally and I think it helps them physically, but it also helps them on the ice because of the structure and the strategy of other sports. I mean, that can overlay with hockey. I think it allows a greater depth of knowledge too. How do you fit that in with today's athlete, even with what you do? Like, do you try and leave room for other sports and other things to play?
You know what? The great point, Jason. And yes, we do. I do. I encourage it. First and foremost, when you're away from the game for an extended period of time, an extended period is, nowadays might be a month, say,
Yeah.
You get off the ice for a month, maybe 6 weeks. You're passionate about you want to get back on the ice. You miss the game. Extremely important. If it becomes a job because it's 24/7, 365 days a week that you're working on hockey only, it can kind of wear on you and be that feeling of a weight on your back. So yeah, getting away from the game, number one, for a little while breeds, passion to get back and do some more. Also, what I found is athleticism, being an athlete, hand-eye coordination, just athletic running and change of direction, those types of things that, are in a lot of different sports, soccer, lacrosse, for examples, that are real good crossovers for hockey.
Yeah.
It builds and breeds the better athlete, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Not even to mention, as you brought up, the strategy that goes along with the game, like lacrosse. It's very similar to hockey, and a little bit different in soccer, but still creating 2-on-1s, moving the ball around, moving to open space, and that's the game of hockey. And so, yeah, there are lots of parallels. But the biggest thing for me, honestly, the biggest thing I think is just getting away from hockey breeds the passion to come back. You really want to be back on the ice, while creating, an athletic base that's super important.
Yeah, I think that, like, I mean, I don't want to get into the neuroscience of it because I'm no neuroscientist, but like even the connections, like the way you acquire skill, the brain needs some time to put those things together too, right? And everyone does manufacture that differently, but you can shoot 1,000 pucks. But if you honestly do that every day, like, it's hard for the brain to actually wire. You need to step away and let it do its work without you being there. And then you come back and all of a sudden sometimes you see your biggest improvements after stepping away for a little while. It's almost like anything creative or anything skill based, right? Like you're writing a book, you have to step away to come back to write again, and all of a sudden things start to click. So I think, sometimes parents, I think that's where parental involvement needs to get in. If you have the kid that's like super keen, and my kids are super keen, like sometimes I have to tell them, no, like, we're not going on the ice today. And like, I'm the bad guy, right? Like, which is fine.
Yeah.
But I think I got to protect their best interests sometimes, right? When it comes to that. And I know that I'm in a fortunate spot, and I am grateful for that, because I love kids to be passionate about something, right? It doesn't have to be hockey. I know I'm a hockey guy, but just the fact that they love something, they want to do it, that's completely fantastic. I'd rather be on that side of the fence than cheering them on to get off the couch, like, find something that you love. But there is a balance there, I think, too, and that was kind of what I was asking too about the programming aspect of maybe the CSHL, because I talked to, well, for instance, I'll just maybe start with, I have this thing on Wednesday called, I just call it my elementary academy, UMH Wednesday, up my hockey academy. And so parents choose to take their kids out of elementary school. So grade 6s and 7s is usually who I'm working with. And I get them Wednesday morning. So we start around 7:30 and they go back to school around noon. And it's based around hockey because they're hockey players and they're passionate about hockey. So we get 90 minutes on the ice that, I break up into skill development and some drills and then some play at the end. But then I also introduce them to 2 other activities, like and it's really like as diverse as I can have it. We've done football, soccer, ultimate frisbee, jujitsu, rock climbing. We're doing pickleball right now. We go to the pool, like rugby we've done. Like, anyways, like, it's across the board, and we do it for like a 6-week segment, and then we rotate. So just like to align my philosophy with what I think these kids should be exposed to. Plus I have my own grievances about what the local school system does with PE now. And I think it's not really, it's more, get out and play tag instead of actually learning a sport. But anyway, so like that's sort of what I created, just because I thought that there was a hole there. And I thought that, it's better for hockey players to actually learn. Now with you at the academy system, I know you probably have players and families that, like, the more ice, the better, right? Like, the more you're on the ice, and I want to know how much ice, and I want to know how many practices, where maybe there might be an internal part of you saying, well, geez, I'd rather have these kids go out in the soccer pitch today, and like, and maybe have them do some of that stuff. Do you have a hard time trying to balance or fit in opportunities to do other sports?
There is that element. I mean, parents look at how much ice a week, and it's a big part of obviously drawing people to an academy setting. And yeah, we do have that. We have to balance it for sure. But we have a luxury with a number of ice times, built-in rest periods after, being busy with gameplay and all that kind of stuff. Those are the perfect days we would call a rest day, to get them doing something different. You talked about ultimate frisbee. We did lots of flag football, things like that. We do play some lacrosse, like just anything to just be a little bit, get away from the game, but still be athletic. And so, yeah, lots of that stuff. Even we kind of switch over, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, but we switch over in the springtime when our competition sort of season ends to a lot more of building athleticism. And that's, a big part of what we'll do. We'll have soccer games and things like that go on. And so, yeah, it's a little bit of a shift definitely to get those, even basketball, things like that for the hand-eye, and dribbling a ball, most of them catching, playing baseball, whatever you can think of, we try to do, and just kind of implement that into that schedule. There's still ice time, sure, during the week, but they will have something like that, and I believe it pays dividends. That's something that a lot of the programs out there, when it's just strictly hockey related, I think they miss the boat a bit on.
Yeah, good for you. Sounds like you're a little bit of a hybrid, because I talked to the director of Okanagan Lake there, and he said it's something that he loves about the program, that when the competition season ends, like, they actually have to do something different there. Like, they have to go to be rowing, or they have to do golf, or they have to do whatever. And he thinks it's awesome, but he also said there's a lot of like hardcore hockey parents that think it's the worst thing about it, and they lose people because of that, So it sounds like you're kind of doing a little bit of both, which maybe is a nice little mix there. They still stay on the ice a little bit, but they're also having the opportunity to go explore other sports and stuff. So that's great. There's one. It's funny too, because like this generation is now like starting to be in the NHL, like these pros that have done the essentially 11-month, 12-month a year hockey thing their entire lives. And I was talking with a trainer from the Senators, and he was actually aghast at like how unathletic these guys are. Like, they go out in the field and throw a football around. He says half the team can't even throw. Like, it's crazy. Like, to him, they think that these are world-class, athletes or hockey players that just haven't been exposed to really anything else. So that makes me think about injuries now too, and how guys get injured and different things. I don't know if there is any correlation, but it strikes me as pretty crazy that an NHL player can't throw a football. But I think that's just the way the development system has worked for these guys growing up.
Yeah, you're absolutely right with that. I spent a few years with the Kamloops Blazers coaching, and I remember some of our athletes, 16, 17-year-olds coming in, and again, not being able to do just fundamental things, play a little soccer, kick a ball around. I mean, they look like they're a giraffe out there that's the first time he's been running, right? And so, yeah, it is. It's a little bit, it's distressing almost. But I think that you talk about injuries and all that kind of stuff. I know in the goalie setting, I mean, they're starting to find for sure the amount of goalie sessions that a young fellow would be on the ice for is creating hip issues in their early 20s, or even before that. You're seeing a lot of these goalies undergoing surgeries to correct those problems, and it's just overtraining. And so, yeah, it has to be in a similar, I'd have to think, and it'd be similar to a position player that's on the ice and just consistently doing the same thing. And so I believe in it. I know I've my son was a good player, went on to play in the Western Hockey League, and then went on to a good CIS career, and is getting his law degree right now. He did a lot of different things as a young person. Like, he played soccer, played baseball, lots of different things outside, and he is an exceptionally good athlete. And I think that translates to the hockey player too. So, it can work. There's proof there that, 12 months of the year being a hockey training type family, it works. But there are some detriment, I think, to the body potentially that I think we're going to start to see a little bit more of as we go in and their careers start to move through.
I guess I do like the topic, and I do like sharing kind of some of these different opinions about that, just because I think there's a lot of people that maybe aren't as well versed in it as you or as I, just from being players even, so you have these parents now that have these athletes that love hockey and are good at it, and they feel like they have to keep up with the Joneses. Like, and there's always another tournament, there's always another ice session, and if they don't do it, right, heaven forbid that he might fall behind. And I just like putting a spotlight on the idea that sometimes it's actually exactly what you need, and you're not falling behind, so just to take a breath and just relax, and we don't have to chase every last ice time. If you don't think it's right, I think go with your gut on that, and take what you need sometimes. And I just want that message to get out, because I don't think it has to be an all the time thing if it's not right for your family, or if it feels like not right for your kids. So I guess that's really my motivation behind that discussion, is that I hear these families sometimes struggling with, what do I do and where do I stop, and all this kind of stuff. So to your point, like, yes, it does work for some players, like, to go all the time. It also works for other players not to. So I don't think there's any like one right path. And you got to find the path for you. But maybe we'll shift back to you, like making that choice now to jump to junior A hockey, with you said the Fort Saskatchewan Traders. Sounds pretty similar to me. I jumped to the BCHL. I played my first year of Bantam, and then second year Bantam, I went to Penticton. I played with the Panthers. Paul Correa was there at the time, and that was my gateway into the WHL as a 16-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
What were your reasons and your family's reasons? I'm sure it wasn't just your choice, and probably mom and dad were involved in that decision as well, to pack up, kind of leave home, right? Or were you in Fort Saskatchewan?
I was at the time. I was I was in Fort Saskatchewan.
That's right. So you didn't have to leave home. So that was a nice advantage. So you didn't have to leave home, but you did make the jump to junior A, playing with 20-year-old men as a 15-year-old, maybe even a 14-year-old. You said if you're there for a season and a half. So walk us through that and how you felt that was the best place for you.
Well, you know what? I honestly came out of Bantam. Pretty accomplished player at the time, and had some success, and the Traders, obviously, as I mentioned, my home junior program, came to me and said, "Would you like to come to camp?" So went into camp and had to make the team. That was first and foremost, had to be of the level, and felt comfortable right away, felt challenged. I think if I remember correctly, I scored 30 goals as a 15-year-old that year in the league, and was an all-star. So it was the right level for me, pushed me. And at the time, I wanted to play in the Western League. That was sort of my dream, to play in that league. I talked about the process of listing, I think at the beginning here, listing players, going on a protected list in the Western League back in those days. And at the time I was with the Calgary Wranglers. A long time ago now, dating myself. The Wranglers has been out of there for a number of years, but now the Lethbridge Hurricane organization. But anyway, I was with the Wranglers, and quite frankly, didn't really gel. Didn't want to be in that program. Coaches, just a few things. I'd gone to camps. They wanted me to play there, but I just didn't have a comfortable feeling. So that's the reason, really, I didn't go even earlier to the Western League, was that. So playing at home was a natural thing for me. And through that near the end of the first year, the Blazers were able to trade and acquire my rights. So again, going back in as a 16-year-old, actually, sorry, it was midway through the second year I was playing as a 16-year-old back in Fort Saskatchewan. They acquired my rights. As soon as I was traded to Kamloops, again, I wanted to play in the league, and Kamloops was the team, at the time, was dominant. And so that's where I wanted to go. And it was natural. Ken Hitchcock was the coach. He had kind of talked to me off and on through the summer leading in. He was a guy that, I just felt comfortable with, and, felt that he was going to give me, the coaching and the tools I needed to be a pro. And, when they traded for me at that time, it was natural. I left midway through that season, went to Kamloops, and then never. Right. The rest is history. Sort of. Kamloops was a wonderful opportunity for me. Played with some great players there. The Mark Reckys of the world, and the Scott Niedermayers, Daryl Sadors, those types of players. Dan had a great run through my years there.
Yeah. How about well, first, maybe just back with the Traders days. Do you think there would have been a difference if there wasn't an AJHL team in your hometown? Like, would that have been a much bigger decision to make, that you'd have to leave home now at that age and all the rest that goes along with that?
I think so. I really felt I didn't think that playing midget would be challenging enough at the time, I think. And when I went to junior, obviously, being on the all-star team, and as I mentioned, scoring 30 goals as a 15-year-old, I was right. I needed the challenge, and I probably would have been more inclined to be leaving, for sure. It was nice. It was there. I was comfortable. And I think that also is a big thing. I was able to live at home. It's not easy. We've all done it. Hockey players at some point are going to leave home, and it is not easy to do. Especially at 15 and 16 years old. So I was fortunate in that regard. And I was ready to go, at 16, partway through that season, right after Christmas, ready to go. And I needed that next challenge.
And maybe we'll interweave that just with what you're doing now at OHA, because, I left at Well, I didn't leave. See, that's the thing. Like I left Vernon at 14 to go play with Sherwood Park in the minor hockey system. They had one of the best Phantom programs going. And I didn't think, whatever. It won't get into me. But so I went there. But the thing was, my mom came with me. I was the only child. So like my family was able to do that. And then the next year in Penticton, I was a 15-year-old. And my mom came with me again, like got a condo there. And she didn't want me billeting or being by myself at that age. Right.
Sure.
So, I honestly didn't have much an iron in the fire with that. Like I can't remember if I thought it was great or didn't. I just wanted to go play, right? So I think that's just the way it worked out, and that was the rules that Mom had, that she was going to be coming with me. And then at 16, I left for Spokane, and that was when I lived with the Billet family, and Mom didn't come at that point. So again, I only have my own world to think of there with that. But now, like with OHA and the academy system, and even with my oldest son now, Hudson, right, who thinks he wants to be a CSHL player next year. There's a good chance that he won't be living at home, but this is now, we're talking 14 years old, right? Like we're talking pretty young stuff here. The billet scenario in your program must be one of the most important pieces of it. I would assume, we're dealing with kids that are that young coming to your town.
Absolutely. And we take that very seriously there, or here at OHA. We have a full-time director of residential life, a person that is doing that full-time. That's his job. So, first of all, going out and recruiting billets, and then going to the home, making sure that the space is adequate for the players, and a real in-depth interview process with the player and then the family to make sure, for example, there's no pet allergies and food allergies and things like that. So we take a lot of pride in it, and it's been a wonderful part of our program for a long, long time. And a lot of the same families are doing it for great reasons and have long time relationships built. And I'm sure you'd remember your Spokane days and your family from Spokane. So, so yes, it is something we take very seriously. And you know what? You look at a 14-year-old, as we just talked about coming, it has to be a comfortable, family-oriented environment. They have to be looked after well. And, again, that's why we invest the dollars in a full-time person to do just that.
Yeah, good for you guys. Do you do you have many families that do, like how I said my mom comes, like especially that U15 age? Do you have parents that come and relocate for the winter just to be closer and with their kids?
Absolutely. That is part. Some of the families do that, and it's everybody's sort of in a different position, both financially, working parents, all those types of things. And so, yeah, that does happen. Now, a lot of times, not a lot, but there are times where maybe a couple of players from an area come and they share some rental of a property, and parents kind of come back and forth in and out. And it's somebody's mom that is very close to that player that's with them. So, or dad too, for that matter. So, it's everybody's different, and their individual sort of needs or wants are different, and we see all different things for sure.
Yeah. I mean, to your point with the billets, I totally, not that I have an amazing, like, not, I don't talk to them all the time, but like I do once a year, probably I'll call my billets in Spokane. If I ever go back through there, for sure, I try and set up a dinner or a lunch. And, it's just, I mean, when you find the right one, it's awesome. Obviously they're around you around probably the most formative times of your life, your late teenage years. And it's a memorable scenario. And also, I mean, then that's why it's so important, and credit to you guys to have somebody looking after that on a full-time basis, because if it's not done well, it can like ruin kids too. I mean, we've probably seen that before a little bit, unfortunately, on some scenarios where it doesn't work out. But yeah, you mean your time in Kamloops, I was looking at some of the teams there. You mean some of the names, and you mentioned some of them, but the one that you didn't mention, which, as far as from a point perspective, was the most prolific. Mind you, your time there wasn't very long when he was there, but was Rob Brown. And he was quite a character kind of at the time, and also went on, I'm not sure if he was on the Pittsburgh team that you were there with in 92, but I mean, 212 points. Like, he's the last guy to touch 200 points in the WHL. And I mean, I've heard some good stories. I'm sure they're folklore, just kind of about the way he was and the way he played. And one of which, and maybe you can vouch for this. I heard it was like an exhibition game, or who knows what kind of game it was, but Hitchcock was yelling at Brown to back check, that he needed to back check. And I heard he came over to the bench and he leaned on the bench and he said, Hitch, I don't back check. They back check me.
Well, there was many of those types of comments through the years. And Rob Brown, he was a real cool personality to go along with his talent. I mean, that was always a knock. He didn't work overly hard without the puck, all those things. But, honestly, when you score 212 points, you have the puck a heck of a lot more than you don't. And so he was pretty special. And went on to the NHL too. He's a 50 goal scorer in the NHL, playing with Lemieux. There's a lot of stories, some good, some bad, about Robbie Brown. But what I remember with my time there, it was my 16-year-old season with Robbie. And then he turned pro at 19. I just remember a good human, good person, always really, really good to me as a young player. And just an exceptional talent that wanted to win and made people around him better. Everybody that played with him had success. And so, that is the true sign of a great player. And, I don't know, you never say never, but that record has stood a long time. And I'm not sure in the way the game's played today if it'll ever be broken.
Yeah, it's impressive. Actually, the one of my previous guests, Mark Dial, maybe a name you remember. He was a hell of a junior himself. Yeah, and he played with Frankie Bantam, actually, who I just had on. Frankie scored 83 goals the one year they were playing together. And just one of those, chemistry one, and, opportunity two, with how much they were playing, and just kind of the stars aligned that year. But that hasn't been beat. And that was in whatever it was, 94 or 95. No one's beat Mark's numbers from that point. So, they have to jump 167 before they can get to 212, right? Or whatever it was. So, who knows with 212? Mind you, if Connor Bedard was around for one more year, maybe he'd have a chance to do it. But that's just nuts. Not so numbers, it's 212 points in 63 games. That's an average of over 3 a game, right? That's hard to do over a season. I talked to that with my boys just about the NHL level, right? Just from the math side of it. If you don't get a point in a game, you need 6 the next night, right? Or 7, to keep pace.
Absolutely. And he was, I believe that year he played in the World Juniors too. I think if you look back, it was a 72 game schedule at the time, and he was probably at 63 or 4 because of the World Juniors. So, it's just incredible numbers. It truly is. And, again, I don't know if it'll ever be beaten based on, it's just the game's played a little bit differently nowadays, a little bit, more tight checking, all those types of things. And honestly, the goaltending is better than it was. So, a little harder to get by those guys.
Yeah. You mentioned some huge names there. Scott Niedermayer is a Hall of Famer. I'm not sure if Mark Recchi is. If he's not, he's probably right on the outside looking.
Yeah, he's probably going to be.
Yeah, he's probably going to be. And Robbie Brown. There's Greg Hoggood there. That's kind of an under-recognized name. That was an absolutely special talent. I like looking back now, when you were there at the time, who did you think would have been, who would you have put your finger on to be the guy? What is it, the way it worked out?
Well, you know what, Mark Recchi, I was fortunate as a 16-year-old when I first got there. I got to play with him, and then my 17-year-old season was on his wing. He played center for us there. He was special. He was special in a lot of, well, not a big guy, but just a workhorse, skilled, so much will to win battles. And you kind of had a feeling that this guy's going to do something special. What he did in his career, maybe not so much. For him to be, 14 or almost 1,500 NHL games, the Stanley Cups that he's won with different franchises, I may not have thought that level, but there was something special in him. You knew there was something. Scott Niedermayer, right from day one. I was a 19-year-old when Scott came in as a 16-year-old. 2 months into the season, he's quarterbacking the power play, one of the most lethal power plays in a long time in that league, with Len Berry, Phil Huber, myself, and Scotty on the. It was pretty dangerous PP, and he's a 16-year-old. So I knew then this kid he's another planet good. and he didn't, that's Scott Needham. If you know anything about Scott, he had no idea how good he was, so non-assuming, and so like, just one of those things, just one of those guys that really didn't know how good he was, truly. So it's pretty special. And Daryl Sador is another. Daryl Sador was an exceptional talent as well. So lots of guys like that.
Yeah, the Niedermayers, I had a chance to play with Rob. He was drafted by Florida too, as was I, and obviously Rob played lots of years there with the Panthers, and just really like down to earth, just good people, right? And that's kind of what I've heard about the Niedermayers, and obviously must be something to do with mom and dad and their upbringing there and how they were raised. But they just really did seem like you just wanted to be around them. Good energy, there was no pomp, there was no it's just kind of just down to earth, and that's what I've heard about Scott as well. It's are you still there?
Yeah, I am. I just lost just for a sec. Sorry about that.
No worries. Yeah, looking at Mark, just when I brought him up, like you said, 1,650 NHL games, and that's from a 4th round pick, 67th overall. Like obviously he did great, and the way you described him, oops, I'll just pause 40:52.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries. Is it something that it's all taken care of?
Yeah, it's all good. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Just, I saw something pop up. I touched my phone, and all of a sudden I went blank. So
no worries. Yeah, I'll just, like I said, no big deal. Let's cut that out. We'll just jump right back in. No, I just said right when we broke there that Mark Recchi was a 4th rounder. To get the 1,650 games is amazing. And I'm sure that Pittsburgh would have joked that they were so smart they took him in the 4th round, right? If they knew what he was going to be, they probably would have taken him a lot earlier. But what a career! And the way you describe him, I don't know how familiar you are with, like, or how much you keep in touch with the Blazers or junior, major junior now, but almost sounds a little bit like a Logan Stankoven at this age.
You're right. I've seen Logan play enough games. I coached against him in the SSHL and saw him a little bit on the ice in Kamloops now. Very similar player, very similar. Just have that will, that passion that you will not stop me. And so, that's a good comparison for sure.
He's got a high motor from what I've seen, and like really, really competitive, to your point. And maybe that's maybe a little good segue there. The competitive nature and like the mindset, the attitude of the player, and just how, I don't know, I believe it stands out maybe a bit more in today's game than ever before, just because it's such a skill-based game that I think these guys that have a little bit of edge to their game and some sandpaper and have a nose for the hard areas, that it's like, wow. I mean, this is somebody that I noticed. Do you find that as well? Not only when you're watching a game, but maybe even when you're recruiting for some of your programs? Is that something you look for?
Oh, absolutely. It's the one thing that it's hard to teach if you don't have. It's hard to be consistent and get that consistent. I call it will, the will to win a puck battle, And guys that have it, guys that are not afraid to get into the contact, into those tough areas, really do stand out. And to really find one that's, over like physical and has all the elements, it's almost hard nowadays. Everybody is skilled. Like, I mean, the kids of today that come into our program, they're more skilled puck skills than me. Like, there's no question about it. I played at a high level, and they have better puck skills at 14 and 15 than I do. But I would, but the one thing, just looking back on how I played the game, they lack that part. They really do, and it's hard to get it, to be consistent in their game. So, the players that have it, they are absolute gems. Honestly, they're the ones that you want in your team. And you look at NHL teams. If we just use that, the teams that win all have that type of player, or are multiple players like it. Tampa Bay Lightning, didn't win last year, but you look back to the couple of years, their talent has it. The Braden Points of the world, not a big guy. He's similar to a Mark Recchi, like the guys that we talked about. They have the will. They have the skill to make a play, but they have the will to go to the hard areas to score. And he's just one example of many on that team that are, just gritty, hard to play against guys. So,
I like that too. That you, even when we talked about, Stankoven, or one of the guys that I refer to is hurt right now, but is Kyler Yamamoto, another WHL prospect. But just how people can be competitive in maybe a smaller package size. Like that's one of the things when my Facebook parent group, the confidence or the willingness to compete when you're in a small package, right? Like size, it doesn't have to, it's more, I think it's more here, right? Like it's something that you have to have an approach to, like how can I still be effective? And when you watch a Kyler Yamamoto, like I think I would study him if I was a younger guy, just because he's so competitive on pucks. He's not going to hurt you physically ever, like he's not intimidating that way, but he's intimidating with his tenacity. Right? Like, he's just not going to stop. And I just don't. I think some of these smaller players, like, you can get away now in today's game by being really, really strong on pucks and really willing to get in there in that type of way. And I just, again, to your point, it seems like some of that, and it pains me because I'm a bit of a dinosaur that way. Like, that's what I love. I really love that aspect of hockey. Those guys that are willing to do that, right? I love that. And you combine that with the skill. And I think the pendulum's going to start swinging back a little bit. Like, we're going to have a really special game, I think, in like 5 to 7 years, because I think that like that aspect is going to become more wanted, right? And I think because it's more wanted, I think more guys are going to start being willing to do it.
Yeah, I agree, and I think scouting has to change, and it's beginning to change a little bit what we look for in a player, because I just mentioned, you study any Stanley Cup roster, they have a bunch of players that are that type on it. You still need the skill for sure, but there is a will associated with the winning, and it's been that way since the dawn of the game. You need guys that are gritty, that want to play, that want to win, that are going to do whatever it takes. The game changes in the playoffs. It changes at every level. Don't kid yourself to think that the whistle gets a little less blown by the refs. A little bit more is allowed. So you still have to want it more than your opponent. And I believe that too. I think that part of the game is drifted away a little bit because everybody is just so drawn to puck skills. But at the end of the day, the most successful player has a balance of both.
Yeah.
And that, I push that. Just to talk a little bit about what I would do with a team in a week, for example, I have one day every week that is just battle and compete. That's what we call it. It's the work day, boys. It's going to be battle and compete. And it's not just one-on-ones, it's tracking. It could be all sorts of different things that are in that, but it's hard work, it's game-like, and it's about will. Who wants to get that puck more than the other guy? And as the year goes on, those types of things become more ingrained in the player. They have less issues with contact. They have less issues with the battle, and I think it helps. They're in their growth. So it's you can have a skill day and they're toe dragging and doing shooting and all that stuff, but the skill of battling, the skill of competing, we do not work on enough. And I think that's extremely important.
Yeah, good for you. I think that's great. It's funny as you were saying that. I just sort of, there's. I'm sure you've had a lot, obviously, in your long career working with players, but there's a couple of just moments that stood out for me. Whether it's working with my players, you know what I mean, that my clients now in the mindset portion, or my kids, and Hudson just came to mind because when we first started, and he's my oldest. For those who are listening here, I know Mike knows, but. At the Adam level, he was still obviously figuring the game out and where he was at it, and he was the oldest. So usually the oldest is usually the most tentative and most cautious, right? Out of my three, it seems like he's fitting the norm that way, and he's a little bit tentative on pucks. I mean, this is like we're talking 8 years old, right? And so we were having this conversation. I was like, "Well, Hudson, who do you think gets the puck out there? There's only one, and there's 10 people, right? So who gets the puck?" And he was like, "Well, the fastest guy." And I was like, well, no, he doesn't get it, and so we go, and he kept the most skilled guy. And I'm like, no, it's the guy who wants it the most. That's who gets the puck. And it was sort of this weird thing at 8 years old where it's kind of his lights shifted because he didn't think he was the fastest guy, right? And he didn't think he was the biggest guy. And so all the things he was telling me, I was like, no, it's the one that wants it the most. And it was like, I could see that for him. It was like, wow, that's just a choice for me. Like if I want it more, it could be my puck,
Yeah.
And so like sort of a foundational concept, but it's actually stuck with him. And when the players that do have that, it really is like, to your point, that will. And when you have that attitude that no, this is my puck, like it's mine and I'm going to want it more than you. And because of that, I'm going to have it more. And it's kind of a cool thing. I just love that because it's totally something that translates into scouting, into watching from the stands, into coaching, right? The more guys that you have that are tenacious like that, the better. But, back to you though. Let's go to, so you have a really great jump to your to pro. Like you go to Muskegon, like I said, CIHL, which was an older league at the time. For those who aren't familiar, like there was definitely some prospects there, but it was a lot of guys that either had played pro already at the NHL level or whatever.
Yeah.
There was a lot of older guys. You talked about Jock Calendar, so it was a little bit more polished game, I would say. Like the IHL was a little more polished than the AHL, and to be productive there was no easy task, especially with all these veterans around. So you stepped in and had a great start. Like, do you remember anything about that year? Becoming a professional, paying your own bills,
Sure.
figuring out all that stuff while you're trying to play the pro game.
Yeah. Things that stand out. First time truly away from, obviously leaving a billet home, just like having mom and dad truly around, as we talked about earlier. But moving into a place and just having to do everything on your own, go get your own groceries, build, make your own meals, make sure you're in bed. Like there's no one there to tell you all these things and do that for you. So growing up real fast, honestly, and learning how to do it on the run. I remember that it was some growing pains, but wonderful. I really enjoyed that part. I had a tough start, go back to a lot of good things. I had a really tough start. The first 11 games or 12 games of the season, I was a healthy scratch, even though I led the team in scoring in the preseason. And it simply had to learn a hard lesson real early that I wasn't as high a draft pick as some of the other players that were coming into the program. Yeah, getting sent down from the Penguins. And so I had to just wait my time, just paying my dues. And Phil Russell, I don't know if you remember that name. Phil Russell played in Chicago, big defenseman years back, and one of the hard-nosed guys of the era. He was my assistant coach at the time, and he kind of took me under his wing and said, "Mike, we're just going to do extra. You're going to work. You're going to get your chance, and you must be ready for it." And so kind of kept me on the sort of the straight and narrow. And from that point on, when I finally got in the lineup, things just took off. I was able to battle my way in. Then I worked my way into the second power play unit shortly after that. And then I was on the first power play unit. And then all of a sudden, having success and being one of the top players at that level, it started to happen. This is my second year pro. I was second in the league in goals, and playing with Jock Calendar and Dave Mikhailuk, and sort of just learning how to be a pro, learning how to go through those tough times. And we all know that, Jason, they're going to happen to you at some point. But having good mentorship around me made a huge difference to that start of my career.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, I love that you bring that up and how it isn't fair. And I think that's that concept is so tough, and I think it's getting tougher, honestly, in because of what society is telling kids too these days, right? Like,
Mhm.
I don't want to get too philosophical, but with, the everyone gets a ribbon, and with the, everyone is allowed to play, and with the, you know what I mean? Like all that kind of messaging. Now, when you're at the junior level or the pro level or wherever it happens to you, and all of a sudden it's not fair, and it gets really easy to feel victimized, and I know that we felt victimized even back in the day, and that's with a completely different set of environmental
Mhm.
factors going on,
Yeah.
right? So I think that made it hard. But like, so to your point, I mean, so you roll in there, you lead the team in scoring an exhibition, and now you can't even get on the ice for the first 12 games. Like, there must have been a lot of mental battle going on for you about, flipping from playing the victim to trying to be a pro and where you fit. Like, maybe can you walk us through sort of the mental game that was going on then?
For sure. And, it was a difficult, really difficult time. Like I was, in everything I did leading up to that, I was the one of the top guys. You're the go-to. You're on the power. You're doing all those things. You're a leader. And then to be told just like that, and really at that level, not necessarily told why.
Right.
They just you're out. You go and you look at your name's not on the roster for the game, and so yeah, you're wondering what the heck happened. What have I done wrong? Um, and ultimately, as I mentioned, Phil Russell, the assistant coach, took me under his wing. He was the one that told me it is going to happen for you, but I believe in you first and foremost. Just stick with this, stick with it. And again, it was a month and a little bit of just sitting out, watching, working as hard as I could in practice to try to catch the head coach, just to maybe get an opportunity. But ultimately, it wasn't even his choice. And that's what I had to learn at the professional level. There are, especially in the minor leagues, right? At the minor league level, your NHL GM might be dictating who's playing. And so I had to learn that the hard way. And ultimately, it was a great experience. I went through it, battled through it, had a positive attitude, kept working. And it ultimately turned out really well for me, and became one of the leaders on that team within a year. So you have to go through that, and every kid that plays the game, if they're going to go to a higher level, are going to go through something like it. They may not like their role. Coach might want them to check. They think they're an offense, but you do what you need to do to get in the lineup. The more you're in the lineup, the better opportunity you have for ice time. Then you do the best with your ice time, and that's ultimately the message. You are not owed anything in the game. The game owes you nothing. You need to earn it all, and that's what I learned there. Sometimes it's not fair. Just go and earn it every day. Do the best you can, and live through it. And I was a lot stronger for it because other things in my career came to. There was other adversity that hit.
Yeah, you mentioned the earning it, and kind of, we were talking about the fairness of it, and I think the message out there is like the truth of it is some guys need to earn it more than other guys need to earn it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's, I mean, there's no right or wrong. It's just the way it is. And I think, even circling back to the passion side of it and how much you want to be there, like there's going to be times where it's going to be easy to quit, and you might even be justified in doing so, right? Like, this isn't working out for me. This isn't my spot. But it's amazing how many guys reflect on the times that might have been the hardest times in their life, and the fact that they got through it was the best thing that happened to them.
Yeah.
Like, that was the biggest learning piece of their entire career, was the time where they hated the game the most, potentially.
It's a great point, Jason, and I reflect on that time. It was difficult, but you're right, and I have so much. I'm so thankful to Phil Russell. Again, he didn't have to do that, but he did, because he knew, he's probably been through it himself as a player enough and saw this kind of stuff happen. He knew I needed some support, and he gave it to me, and that was special. He was I still, to this day, it's a long time ago now, I still talk to Phil. I still, we're still, it's just one of those things that'll be long lasting. He's a good man, and I appreciate what he did for me, because he kept me grounded, kept me focused on what I had to do, and ultimately worked out.
Yeah, no, perfect. Well, and credit to you too for being willing to listen and to take it. I mean, sometimes we're not in that headspace where we're even going to be willing to listen, So you have to be approachable, you have to be coachable, which are other things that I talk about with the players sometimes. That is a skill set in and of itself, right? Like, what are you open to hearing and what are you open to applying? Because sometimes we get in those spots where we got the blinders on, whether it be literally or through the auditory capacity. We don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and great that you remember him. And those are the moments, which now I'm sure when you reflect on that, like what an opportunity you have potentially on a yearly basis to impact somebody, like to have that lasting effect. And I think that the coaches that are doing it right, recognize that there's lots of opportunities in a year to make a difference in it for a player. And are able to do that, because we all sort of need those there are those times where we need it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Do you see that, what I mentioned earlier, just with the kids, today's athletes? Do you find that there is maybe a lesser capacity of resiliency in them, just as a general broad-based spectrum? Like, do you see that, the willingness to deal with adversity and how they manufacture what that narrative means to them?
Yeah, I think there is. What we tend to see now, especially as the kids, the elite kid kind of moves in. You have their advisors, you have parents, and everybody speaks, for the kid instead of the kid being an advocate for themselves a little bit and listening to the message. So it is a challenge, when you look at, I look at it, you mentioned, I do this. That's what I do for a living. I deal with a lot of kids. We have 150 plus kids in our program. All of them are special. All of them need opportunity, and all of them need mentorship. And that's what I take a great pride in doing. Male or female in our program, get a chance to work with them all, and which is wonderful. But the biggest thing is working with some of their problems in relation to the coaches. And it's just communication, and it's the willingness just to listen. It's in the coach's best interest to have a successful player. Like, they're not in it to be against you as a player, and so, it's opening your mind, being open to some constructive talk and not necessarily criticism, but just change to who you are as a player. Be open to it. Understand that the coach has 19 other players as well that they have to mold into a team, and everybody's important. And so that is the one big thing with this generation is, what's in it for me and only me. And there's nothing wrong with that, but at the end of the day, you have to understand that the coach has 19 or 20 other people that they're trying to do the same thing with. And at some point you have to give a little bit in order to fit into that team environment. So it is challenging. It's probably more so than, in our day, Jason, it was the coach told you to do it. You didn't say a word, you just did it. It's how it was. And nowadays it's a question of why. And, that's the big thing for me is making sure that the athlete knows that the why is in their best interest. We're doing this. Why? Because it's going to make you a better player, person, more adaptable as you move on. And so that's the big thing.
Yeah, and those are the lessons that are hard to see. Well, one of the stories that I tell in my mindset program is about being able to see opportunity when maybe it's not the opportunity that you want to see. And one of the stories was from a U15 prep player, actually, that I was working with, who it was kind of funny. It was just like this moment in time where it was an overtime game, and he was, for whatever reason, wasn't put out on the ice for overtime, right? And he thought he was one of the better defensemen, thought he was having a good game, and this completely unwound him, like in the moment, right? Like, was completely feeling down, like lost confidence, thought the coach hated him, like all those things that kind of manifest with that. Essentially got pouty, left the dressing room right away, and sort of put him in a slump for almost 2-3 weeks. Didn't want to look the coach in the eye. All these things happened because of this moment, right? And then after we had a chance to talk about it, like, and reflect, it was like, well, what could have been the opportunity there? Like, I know his opportunities, he wanted to be on the ice, he wanted to impact the game, and he wanted to score the goal or whatever the case was, right? But it turns out that wasn't the opportunity for him that day. And then he on his own, like through questions, was like, well, I could have learned to be a better teammate. I could have learned to be more supportive. Maybe that was my moment. That was the opportunity for me to have a conversation with the coach that would have been difficult, about what it is. And
Yeah.
so it's nice when you can repackage it, right? And they can tell a different story about the scenario. But again, that's super hard to do. And it does sometimes take some mentorship or some coaching or whatever to change what the idea is. But I do believe in that, right? Like the player's capacity to grow as a person, one, is going to help them as a player, and also their ability to see other things outside of like the front and now of what they think that they want, right? Like, and to your point, right? Those 12 games that you didn't want to be on the bench, those 12 games, but it probably taught you some humility. It probably taught you some respect. It probably, really solidified your work ethic and your approach to the game. Like all these things that you weren't really wanting to focus on or thought you maybe needed to was what helped you have the season that you did the following year. So anyways, it's kind of crazy. And again, that's more of a story for the parents out there that are going through something right now that they think, little Johnny or their daughter is struggling with, and they see them hurting, right? That could be the best opportunity. It all depends how you want to frame it for them, really.
That's well put. And it is something learning opportunities happen in so many different ways, and it's all what we take from it. And the thing is having the maturity, and just sitting back, having the maturity to look at it from a different perspective. And it's hard. It really is. It was hard for me back those many years ago, and it's hard, I'm sure, for the kids of today. But that's really what you have to do. The real thing is the coach is in it for the best interest of that player. That's it. My job is to make everybody better, and I'm in it for their best interest. And if parents and the kids themselves realize that, and they just kind of think back or think about that, I think things get a lot easier. And that's for every coach out there for the most part. They're in it for the betterment of the kid.
Yeah. Yeah, especially at the younger ages.
Yeah.
I'll push back a little bit because I think like that's why I like what I do is because I am completely unbiased. Like I want that individual player to be the best that they can be.
Yeah.
And I've also been the head coach, so you are worried about the collective, right? There is a collective attitude of like how do we progress as a group. So I think you can't specifically focus on 20 individuals, I guess at what age. But to your point, I do agree with you in the fact of like there's no one out there that doesn't want someone to succeed or doesn't want someone to be good, right? It's just it is tough because everyone wants the same minutes. As you know, right? Everyone wants those responsibilities, and not everybody can have them. I would do us a disservice if I didn't talk about your World Junior gold medal. That was coming on the heels of your 59 goal season in Kamloops, 125 points. You yourself were averaging 2 points a game, got selected to play at the tournament, win the gold medal. And I briefly looked up like, holy smokes, as far as like who was at that tournament, like Lindros, Tony Amonte, Nicholas Lidstrom, Pavel Bure, Jaromir Jagr, Matt Sundin, like these are like names of the era, right? Like, not all tournaments are like that. The World Junior is a special place. There's always a few superstars that are coming out of there. But that's a lot of names, and I'm sure I missed some. So what was that experience like for you playing there? Where was it, first of all? And talk a little bit about that.
Sure. It was in Finland. So we were able to head over early and stay at their Olympic training center called Virmaki, which is in northern Finland, very close to the Russian border. But the experience, it's hard to really, everybody talks about that. How do you explain it? It was a dream, no question. It was something I wanted as a young player. I wanted to play for Canada and get the opportunity. So going to the training camp and going through all that stuff, playing well, waiting for my name. I'll never forget that morning when they do the selection. You're sitting there waiting in your room for calls. I still remember just sweating, like, come on, please, just praying that's going to be me. And then getting the call, going into the coach's room, and here's a pile of clothes, Canada stuff, garbed all over the place. You've made it, Mike. Congratulations. And it was unbelievable how that made me feel, and it's something I still have goosebumps right now. Thinking of it, but it was a great experience, playing against those elite players that you talk about. We had Eric Lindros on our team, Mike Ricci, guys, wonderful talents in their own right and Hall of Fame sort of guys. But we weren't really Canada's always sort of the team to beat as they say. We were in the mix, but we probably weren't the favorite that year. And, we just went out, worked our butts off. We were gritty. We had lots of guys that played hard, played the right way, and we got her done. Guy Charon was the head coach. And I'll remember we had a loss. We lost to Sweden. It was a little different format. It was
the round robin format, right?
Yeah, so we played everybody, and it was just points by the end of it. So we lost to Sweden, which is a game we should not have lost, but did. And young guys didn't have a good effort. And then we were in our last game of the round robin, which was against the Czech Republic at the time, and that's Jaromir Jagr. I think there's Reichel I forget his first name.
Robert Reichel, yeah, he led the tournament.
Robert Reichel, yeah, wonderful player in his own right. So these guys we got to defend. Anyway, we're in the middle of the game. Actually, not the middle of the third period, and we get a call or get word that the Russian team, had they beat the Swedes, were playing at the very same time. The Russians would win, and at best we could get silver. But the Swedes scored late in the game, and all of a sudden they get the win. We now, with a win against the Czechs, are going to win the gold. So the last 8 minutes are a blur. I will never forget being on the bench, and I had the wonderful job of playing against Reichel and Jagr. We defended him all game. And so it was just like, pin your ears back, man, do whatever you can, block shots, dive. Like it was one of those kind of hectic 8 minutes, you're stressful, but also wonderful. I remember just the feeling when the buzzer went off, we knew we had won. And so it was an awesome, awesome experience.
That is so cool. Yeah. I mean, you talk about that. I mean, there is, I mean, you hear it in the interviews, but like, especially at that age and being Canadian and playing World Junior, it's just like TSN has done such an amazing job of making that be part of our culture for such a long time, and when that tournament is, and, to wear that leaf on your chest and to be able to, to win gold ultimately is what you want to do. I mean, super, super special. And I'm so happy that we share that bond, because I mean, for a lot of us, I mean, you went on, I guess you won the Stanley Cup too, and, playing the 5 games and doing that. But for most guys, I mean, that's really that's the best. If you're able to do that, that's the pinnacle. I played 10 years pro, and that's still probably the number one thing that happened in my hockey career, right? Like winning that gold medal. So super fun. Who was out of that group there? Like, again, just to reflect, I mean, Eric Lindros, but he was a phenom. Like, he was like that next coming for those of you who don't know. And he was 16, I think, on your team at that time.
That's correct. Yeah.
And he was probably 6'4" and 200 pounds at 16.
He was massive. You bet. Yeah, you bet. He's a big man. And he was a freak of nature, truly. Just such a big guy, could skate and had the skill that he had. And physical. Like, he was a guy that wanted to run you through the boards. He wanted to leave a mark every time he hit you. Yeah. So he was a throwback. Well, at that time, lots were like that, but definitely.
Yeah. Well, interesting though. I mean, but not even, right? Because he had that skill. Like, he was a really skilled player that was just tough as nails and huge, right? Like,
he had a combination of everything. Absolutely.
Yeah, like, sure. I wonder about him. Like, I honestly think, like, today we talked about that, like that. I mean, how like the competitive player and the tough player is a little bit of a unicorn right now.
Yeah.
Could you imagine Eric Lindros in the NHL right now?
It'd be scary without the ability to hold a player up. We could hold you could throw the rope on and hold players up and hook and hold and all that to impede progress. Oh, there'd be some D that probably would be seriously injured. He hit you. He wanted to crush you.
Yeah, like I think that he might. I mean, I love playing those little like mind sessions, right? Like, how good would Mario be, or how good would Gretz? But like, to throw a physical beast like him that had the skill that he had, that was like super fast too. Like, I just think that he would terrorize the league. He'd have so much space, and like, how would you stop him?
Yeah.
Because you couldn't. I mean, you can't stick check anymore. You couldn't hook him. I mean, and he's bigger than everybody. It would just be. I'd love to see what that would look like, because he was a crazy good player. Well, let's talk about maybe moving into Mario, and we're running to the end of our time here. I don't want to take up your time, but we got to talk about the cup. And I know I read in, at least Wikipedia says you got a ring. Did you get your name on the cup for those 5 games? Was that enough?
I did, and it was fortunate. It was fortunate. They did put us on the cup. So yeah, it was got everything. It was great. It was a great experience for sure.
That's absolutely craziness. So you get, and that's your first kind of like step up. And well, not that it's exact same, but Dwayne Sutter I just had on the most recent release, and
Mm-hmm.
he got called up from junior and then joined that dynasty team and ended up winning 4 cups in a row. Actually, 19 playoff series he went without losing a playoff round at the NHL level. If you could imagine
Wow.
that from
Wow,
a
that's
kid, like so
yeah.
crazy. So maybe talk about that team. I said we had to talk about Mario. Maybe just do it for my benefit.
Sure.
What was it like to practice with him? See him, like, even I don't know what type of pain he was going through with his back at the time, but like, how special was he, and what did you remember most about Mario?
Well, you know what I remember the most, he was going through a lot at the time. Like he was in a lot of back pain, having issues. He also was diagnosed the one year I played with him with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So he had a cancer treatment in the middle of all of this. And so he, for a guy that was going through so much pain, couldn't practice very much, to be honest. He would come out in a tracksuit and get, 20 minutes sort of skate, feel his hands and stuff like that. And then just, it was all game stuff. Like, honestly, it was a lot of just put on the gear for games because that's what his body could handle at that time. And I have never, never seen anybody with passing ability and then the strength, size, and power, all blended into one. He was just special in every way. Could physically, like Alindros, he was as big as Eric, probably taller, and a 240-pound frame. He could run you through the glass if he wanted to, but then he could dangle and put pucks into places and make passes and score a goal when needed. Just an incredible talent. The best. I played against Wayne Gretzky too. Just different. Gretz did it with a smaller frame and probably through just being so smart. Yeah. But the true skill, has the package. There may never be another Mario Lemieux like that. He just is so special with his abilities. One story I'll tell you, when he came back from his last treatment, he had a radiation treatment, and we were in Philadelphia. And so he comes back after missing, I think, 18 games or something like that because of the cancer treatment. And he gets 5 points in his very first. He hadn't been on the ice in 6 weeks, and he gets 5 points and 3-2, I believe, something like that, in Philly, a hostile crowd. Just that was Mario. He just was so gifted and so much, just an elite talent that truly one of the best to ever put him on.
Imagine if he was healthy too, right? Like similar to an Orr. I mean, I never had the privilege of watching him play, but hearing people talk about him, I was just at a different level than everybody else. And yet he was also injured. Like, my gosh, if Mario had a healthy career, holy smokes. I mean, and to your point, I mean, I heard that he wasn't maybe the best example as a captain. I mean, not because maybe he wasn't a hard worker, but just for whatever factors, right? He wasn't able to be out there, and he wasn't a gym rat. He wasn't like that. I heard the opposite though. I mean, you talked about Mark Recchi, also Ron Francis. I heard was like the kind of like the ideal icon of what you would maybe want your younger guys to follow. Was there some? Did I name those names right? If you were to remember from that team, like those guys that would just be the ultimate professional that were always trying to get better and doing the little things.
Yeah, well, Ron Francis was all of that for sure. Like, and a better human too. Like, first say that he was so good with young players. A mentor, have you for dinner, like just one of those guys that just made you feel a part of the team, regardless of what your role was with the team. And that's a special leader in its own right. And then just talented, just a hardworking, lots of grit, not super quick, not a real blazing speed type guy, but again, super smart, good playmaker, and just, one of the all-time leading scorers in the NHL for a reason, a Hall of Fame player. But a better person, that's the one thing I'll say again. Larry Murphy was another name on that Hall of Fame. I think he's the top 5 or 6 all-time leading defenseman scorers, played on that team. Again, a great professional. And so we were blessed with the Penguins at that time to have just amazing players and, probably better people too.
Right. Isn't that a key factor? Like, that's a massively key factor. And that's something that's like, totally part of my platform is, and what I really believe in is like the holistic development of the player, meaning like the personal development and
Yep.
the ability to communicate and the ability to be a good teammate and all those things. Like, again, like it allows you to be better on the ice. It allows you to have more longevity, but it allows you to win. I mean, and I think
Yep.
GMs and stuff are looking for that now. Like that's even part of the criteria. It's understood a little bit more, like from a scientific standpoint of like, this is like the culture that is required to have winners, and it requires good people. So you're speaking to that, sounds like in spades, but that with those Stanley Cup championship teams.
Yeah, absolutely. And it didn't matter, as I mentioned, it didn't matter who you were within the team, whatever, how big or small your role was, it made you feel like a big part of it. And that's important. And, holding each other accountable, all those things you hear about, we want players that hold each other accountable. That's great. But making you feel that your role is important is a lot more important to any winning team than holding somebody accountable. And what I mean by that is, like, maybe you go after a player for making a mistake on the bench. And I see that a lot in the young athletes right now. They think that's holding someone accountable or being a good teammate. It isn't. Basically all it does is create animosity within the group. Being a good teammate, make them feel good about the role they play. That's the important part. And that's what leadership's all about. If how big or small your role, if you feel good about it, you're going to fit in, and it's going to be an enjoyable experience.
Yeah, I mean, you're echoing exactly what Brad Larson said on this podcast when he was with the Avalanche there, like with Sakic and Forsberg and Blake.
Right.
And like he said, the only thing that those guys wanted to do was win, right? That's
Yeah.
it. And he
Yeah.
said like the standard of excellence in that room was like nothing he's ever seen before. But he said like in those runs, and they weren't successful the year he was there, but they did go for a pretty good run. Was he felt playing 6 minutes a night that his job was like one of the most important on the team, because that's the way Forsberg made him feel about it. You mean like he totally felt a part of it. And you mentioned the Lightning, and that's the thing with these guys that win. I mean, like the 6 through 12 forwards and the 5-6 defensemen, 7-8 defensemen, they all feel like they are a part of it, and they know they are a part of it, and because they are, like they get those results. So kind of cool that you're saying that, because I assume you would have been in a similar role there with Pittsburgh. You probably weren't getting top line minutes, and the minutes that you did get mattered. But it'd be easy to be forgotten about, even from yourself, right? If people weren't giving you pats on the back or letting you know how important they were.
That's absolutely correct. That's a great point. And I mean, that ultimately comes down from management a little bit, but the player themselves, the players on your team have to also echo what the coach is saying, or management. Absolutely. We had a group there in Pittsburgh that made you feel good about your role ultimately. And so coming to the rink was easy, given everything you could for whatever you had, whatever minutes they gave you, it was easy to do. And just be supportive on the bench with the other guys. And, Mario would play 28 to 30 minutes a game. It was a pretty good spot to sit and watch the best player in the world at the time. Yeah. So, it was an enjoyable experience for me, and I loved my time there. For sure.
Awesome. Well, I will be, I got to give you a chance, and I didn't want to talk about running up on 90 minutes, so I want to respect your time, but I do want to give you an opportunity to talk about the CSSHL and OHA
Sure.
and specific, because I know that is what you're doing now. That's what your job is. And obviously there's a lot involved in that. I mean, one, the recruiting of the kids. I mean, how do you keep them in the system? What does the CSSHL offer that other places don't? What is your elevator pitch for the CSSHL and maybe OHA in particular? What do you think is a good reason for kids to go play with you?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's the level of the league. You're playing against the top level kids for the most part of that age group, and so you're going to get quality games on a consistent basis. Playing against high level players, you're always challenged. That being one of the things. The league has a lot of good players, and I know the Western Hockey League draft isn't the end all be all, but about 35 to 40% of the population drafted into the Western League comes from the league. Obviously meaning there's some good players there. So every day is a good competitive day as far as the competition goes. Across Western Canada now, we actually, the league expands into Ontario. You have the East and the West, so there's lots of hockey opportunities in the CSSHL depending on what region you live in. So, we get to see players from Manitoba all the way through the prairies into BC in our league. That would be a big part of, sort of the selling feature of the quality of player that you're going to be with on the ice. A lot of like-minded, talented players that come into OHA, but also who you're playing against. You're challenged every day. Yeah. So that, again, just talking about that level, it's a big part of what we do.
Is that you mentioned there at the end? I mean, I think that to me, at least as a hockey dad, and you would know more of it because I don't know all the players that come, and if they're all there on their own account or if some are driven by mom and dad that want it more than they do. But you would assume that the players that go there are pretty hockey centric and focused, and it's a big deal to them, which I do believe your environment matters, and being pushed on a day-to-day basis by those who are around you, and maybe seeing that example of the stories you've already told of some kids shooting pucks after and doing whatever like that. Yeah. That can be contagious in its own right, to see those examples. I know I've had some in pro where until you see the standard that's available, I mean, you're not really even sure that it was there for you before. So, I mean, is that one of the benefits as well with who you have coming in?
Well, absolutely. I mean, having those like-minded kids, like everybody's there generally for the same reasons. They want to get better. And that's sort of the beauty of it. You have these kids all together, pushing one another in a positive way, on and off the ice, practicing against elite, it's going to breed better play in yourself. And so I think that's a huge part of what they get when they come into the program. The off ice training too, when you have kids that are like-minded that want to get better, they're going to train harder. And almost through osmosis, you look and go, well, I'm not going to get beat by that guy. That competitive nature is always brought out. And so we really see that. It's like a bunch of alphas, alpha males there and females too, that don't want to get, embarrassed by their peer group, and they're going to push hard to be the same. So it's a real good environment for that. And it is a positive environment because, they're pushed by their peers. It's not always the coach. And I think that's the thing about, true top level athletes. It's not the coach that always pushes. They have to have that internal drive, but also having a little bit of positive peer pressure makes a huge difference too.
Sure. Is there give you an opportunity to speak about OHA? Like, is there something about OHA that that you believe makes it special and a little different, and is one of the places to play in the CSHL system?
I think for us, it's just the support that we put in place. We have a tremendous group of coaches, 7 teams, 5 male, 2 female, with wonderful coaches. We have assistant coaches for every team. And we have, myself, my role is to work and support everybody. A lot of places I don't think would have the same sort of dedicated people to work with the athlete. I can do all sorts of different personal things, like have the personal touch, watch video with the kid that's having an issue. We take pride in every kid. We don't want to leave anybody, not developed by the end of the year. So that I think for us is a big part. Very proud of that we have designated people and just looking to create an environment to help them get better. One other thing that's overlooked too a lot is, we're one of the few academies that has athletic therapists on staff. So if there's an injury, and it's overlooked, it's something that families really don't want to talk about. Hopefully it never happens to their player, but ultimately it does at some point. And we have people in place to help, nurse them back to health. Instead of going outside, having to find other doctors and so on, they're right under the one roof. So it's another, it's a small thing, but I think it's an important thing too.
Well, it's probably huge, and I'm sure there's a lot of preventative stuff that happens there as well, right? Like not even wait until they get injured, but if you have that person on site, maybe you get that little sore muscle strain looked after before it becomes into something huge, right?
Well, the synergy with our therapy department and our strength and conditioning, that goes hand in hand. So periodization of training, making sure there's rest. I mean, it's a scientific, we take a scientific approach to it, and our staff is there. Again, ultimately, it's there for the athlete to get better, but we work and do things based on, the best sort of training and best rest and all those types of things that those kids need. And so it is quite scientific too.
Right.
But the synergy that we have between sort of, again, on ice, off ice, and our athletic therapy department, I think really does set us apart.
Awesome. Well, maybe I'll ask a couple more questions here. Maybe where I think there's holes in the CSSHL system, or maybe some gaps that they're trying to fix, and maybe they are. I have no idea. I'm just from an outside observer looking in, but I think it's worthy of discussion. One is the parity. Like, it seems like there's sort of a group, or like not a fairly large group, but that are competitive. And then there's also a group that really almost seems like they should have their own league. Like, is that something that you've been looking at, or as a whole, of like, how do we tier this, or is the way it's happening now, is that just the way it's going to be moving forward? But it does seem like there's some games that are, 18-0 or 12-1. And it seems like maybe there's not enough, what's the word? Kind of focus on how do we make this be competitive every night.
Well, I think that is definitely, there is an issue there at times. There are some programs that are especially new to the CSSHL that are just sort of developing, because they have expanded fairly rapidly, and so they need some time, obviously, to get the talent pool up. But one of the things that one way to address it, we have what's called a tiered showcase events, and there's a couple of those every year, three or four every year, and so. What happens with that is basically where you sit within the league standings, you're going to play against teams that are like so for example, 10 through 12 might play games and so on. So it kind of, in that regard, we're addressing that very thing, that those teams now are playing competitive games against teams that are close to them in the standings. And of course, 1 through 4 would play, and you're having the top level teams playing all the time. And so that is something that we do address, and we do have on the radar for sure. And it's just, it's also a little bit of patience before these teams are going to, attract those talented kids and get more competitive too. But in the meantime, that's what we're trying to do.
Gotcha. Is it a balanced schedule? It's one thing I didn't know. Like, does everyone play the same amount of games against the same teams?
No, that isn't. There is a bit of a regional flair to it. So, for example, here in the Okanagan, we're going to see Rink Kelowna a lot. They're just down the road. Also, Yale Academy, which is 3.5 hours to Abbotsford, and Delta. So that's sort of our 4 teams in our little sort of, I guess that would be our pool. So we'll play them a little bit more weighted towards those teams, and miss, the St. George's or the Island teams a little bit. And that's where you have your sort of, you have a few of your games that are going to be against that pool. And then the weighted, as I said, those weighted showcases after that, where you play teams depending on sort of where you sit in the league.
Gotcha.
Okay. And so
I was just wondering just checking out the scoring leaders and stuff, right? Which I know is super important to these kids. And, if I won't name names, but if you're playing some of the lower teams, right, more often, obviously that helps the way the stats look for you.
For sure. That one thing, you look at it, I would like to think OHA is in the toughest division in the entire, we got 4 great teams that are playing against each other in that in our little pool. And so we're playing tough games all the time, and we're fortunate in OHA got 3 of the top 6 guys in the league, and they're playing against the top competition, which is wonderful to see.
Yeah, awesome. Maybe we should give you, I don't know if you want to or not, but the Ruck brothers and Mathis Preston,
Sure.
I love talking about teams, and I know the team is bigger than just those 3 of them, but it also is nice to talk about stars sometimes too, because they all 3 of them seem to be, well on their way to getting a high draft pick this year. Anything you want to add about them? I know they've been kind of stars of your program there this year at the U15 level.
Yeah, just all 3 of them, way back to where we started about the passion for the game. All 3 are just at a whole different level. They absolutely love playing hockey. The Ruck boys, the twins, they're smiling every time they have their stick in hand, and so it's really, really refreshing. These kids are there and love doing it, and have a level of ability that I have not seen very often come through a program. Like, they are legitimate NHL potential stars. They're that good. And so I say that lightly. I've seen NHL players, I've coached them. Michael Rasmussen, who's playing for the Detroit Red Wings right now, is in the NHL. He played. These guys are at a different level than him, and so we could have some special kids come through the program. And not since Connor Bedard is a name that's all over there. Obviously first overall pick projection. He came through our league. I remember coaching, being on the bench. These kids have qualities like him, so pretty special, pretty neat to see, and to be. I'm fortunate. I got to coach them all last year as first year U15 prep players. I was the head coach of that team, to see them firsthand all the time. But now getting on the ice with them, it's just special. These kids are elite, and they're going to have great careers.
That's great. Yeah, great words, and nice to see that they fit the bill too, of just being kids that love the game and good teammates and doing what it takes there to help other guys out too. Okay, so the last thing I'll end off here is just with the costs of playing hockey, right? And I know that you guys have a business and no idea what the balance sheet is. Like, you have a lot of people in place, and I know there's expenses there. But you're also an advocate for the game of hockey, right? Too. And I just wondered, like, how do you balance the costs? And is there any type of program within OHA or the CHL in general that enables families who maybe can't write the check to be able to play at that level? I mean, if that's where they would like to go.
There's scholarship opportunities. OHA, for example, has a fund that we have in place. We have a group that is raising money to raising funds to allow opportunity for less fortunate families to come in. And so we do have the opportunity within OHA based on each individual. I'll be very honest, we're battling through COVID, and that took a bit of a hit through that time, as it's done for everybody. No excuses, but it has. And so we're building that pool back up through, donation, through charity golf tournaments and stuff like that. But yeah, it's available to families through OHA, and not to speak for the other programs. I'm sure they have other opportunities as well, but just knowing what OHA does, if a family needs some financial assistance, we can sometimes do that for them.
That'd be awesome. It'd be great too if the league had some type of a publicized kind of scenario, right? Would be fun. I mean, I'm always in the back of my head trying to figure out, even the stuff that I do, it's not cheap, right? Like, I know the cost of stuff involved and the value of time, and I hate when I have to say no, or when families have to say no because they can't afford it. I mean, it kind of hurts me, right? And it's like, well, how do we make this more accessible? So I'm sure those are questions that you guys are trying to figure out too, because the accessibility does matter. But to your point, I guess, for everyone listening too, you said 30 to 40% of the draft is CSHL players, which is a huge fraction, but that still also means there's 60% coming from other places.
Yeah,
absolutely. So there is a place to play. Mind you, there's no really affordable option. Even AAA is getting really expensive now, but I mean, every dollar does matter. And again, just to the families out there, you don't have to end up, there's not one spot that you have to be. If you are able to get to the CHL and that makes sense for your family, then by all means, there's lots of good programs, and OHA definitely being one of them. So I guess maybe we'll just leave it there. I mean, it's been 90 minutes, and I really appreciate your time. Awesome stories that you have on a personal level, and I think that we kind of covered all the factors that we could cover, and I'm sure my listeners enjoyed it. So thanks so much for being here, Mike.
Oh, you're very welcome. I appreciate you asking me to come. It's been a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike.
Take care, Jason.